You have your maximum that you're at, but you don't live there all the time. So within a day, you're constantly up and down this ladder of development. So you're there being all wise and everything. Someone like cuts you off in the car park and you're like, yeah, straight down the bottom. So you fluctuate during the day, but you tend to have a sort of centre of gravity that you operate at most of the time. Okay, so you might not always operate at the stage that you develop to. And it's interesting as well because you know the stress and pressure models, you can track it a bit more carefully with this because stress makes you drop a few levels. So if you're like well developed, you can drop down a bit to sort of, you know you're stressed, you know you're not your best, but you're probably not damaging anyone. But if you haven't got far to drop, the stress looks a lot more dramatic. Right, this picks up on your point, what's that, Katie? You might be at different stages for different parts of your functioning. So some people cognitively have the broad perspective, but interpersonally horrendous. Yeah? And that can be type related. Yeah, I haven't done all the research on it, but there's someone who's done it with emotional intelligence, and it's found to be true. So you might not be all those things that were on the list all at the same level. Progress comes via experience. You have to push your comfort zone, otherwise you stay where you are. All the stages can demonstrate good relationships. The key is you have to be at the stage that fits your role in life. Yeah? So if you're someone who's got a couple of kids, you're an admin assistant, this and that, level of personal identity is absolutely fine. But if you're the leader of the free world, you might want to have a bit more understanding of difference and self-awareness. So it depends what your role is. So it's not about getting to the top. And the interesting thing is neuroticism can exist at any stage.
Will you say more about that?
Ask me a question.
Well, what would neuroticism at a higher stage of development look like?
Okay, so this would be like someone who's got a really broad perspective, a lot of self-awareness perhaps, but for some reason their lack of confidence might trip them up here and there. Or they might really drop when there's a stress going on. Yeah. So I'm going to show you a little film of Keith Richards. Who knew? I've trawled around the internet, right, looking at interviews of people to see who's going to be developed, who's going to show in an interview how much they've developed. And I looked at all the usual suspects that you think, oh yeah, he's a cool guy, he's cool. Nothing. I even looked at Freddie Mercury. I thought, this man knows he's going to die. Surely he's got something to say. I like Freddie Mercury. Vacuous. Absolutely vacuous. But during the interview, the interviewer said to him, oh, when I spoke to Keith Richards, blah, 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 blah. So I thought, really? So I looked at the Keith Richards interview. Wise, wise. So I'm going to show you it. It's about 5 minutes long. But look out for that subject-object perspective. When we were in it, we didn't know. When you look back on it, you can see. Look at his concept of time frames and complexity in the system. But also look at his awareness of who he is and what really makes him effective. So he's starting off with it, sort of jumped straight in, but he's talking about when he was a choir boy, again, who knew? So have a little look at this.
Also, it was my first experience of the pink slip. You know, when the voice broke.
Is that loud?
Yeah, I think it says so in the book that there was 2 other guys. We were all good sopranos, and we'd done some stuff around in London. We sang for the Queen, and which did when you're sort of 12 or something is quite a big deal, and also you get a free bus ride to London. Yeah, boys.
But the way you put it in the book, because you had this benevolent choir master, and then your voice broke, and they sling you up, that seems to me to be actually a really important turning point in your life. That seems to be the point where you just decided that school and authority was not what you were going to follow.
It probably was, and the more I thought about that, and that was, this is where the rebel got born. And I think it was just totally unfair treatment as we were concerned about, we sang our hearts out for this school, and then there's this like the boot, and you did, welcome to life.
You say that at a certain point, whether it was a day or an evening, you heard Elvis Presley's song Heartbreak Hotel, and it was as if the world before you heard that song and the world after you heard that song weren't the same place, that somehow a new thing had opened up for you.
I think, I mean, in my mind, I think the world went from black and white to Technicolor. There was a spark, yes. I mean, suddenly I'm hearing this music out of nowhere that is... it was suddenly as everything had come into focus. You know, and that's what you wanted to do. I mean, it was just a fascinating journey. And it's presumptuous, you know, like, you know, 18-year-old white kids from London say we're going to be the best blues band in London. You know, in retrospect, it's a ludicrous sort of aim of all, but...
A very short retrospect, because almost as soon as you feel that you've got somewhere, you're on the TV and you've got a hit record and, oh, what are we going to do now? I mean, you were, what, 20? When suddenly you're performing in front of thousands of what you describe as feral female teenagers.
They're rabid.
History says that you were part of a change in consciousness. You were part of a change in, for example, how men express their sense of who they are, who they can be. The way Mick sang, the way you dressed.
Really?
Did it feel like that at the time? Did you feel like you were changing things at the time?
I don't think that you would find us that aware of those perceptions at the time, but I think it took us too long, slowly, for us to realize that that you have something unique, and it's not me, and it's not the band, it's just a unique meeting of cultures and time that this could happen. Yeah, I mean, the 60s were weird in that. I basically think it's all to do with World War II, and that it was just that generation bursting from that. Forget about the war, please.
If you look at pictures of Keith at the beginning of 1967 and at the end of 67, it's almost like you're looking at two different people. The face changes, deepens. When you look at it, you realize stuff happened that year.
One of the things that comes out very strongly from the way you write in the book is the joy of being in the moment of playing the song, and of people listening to the song, and of the other band members performing the song, and the song coming together. And I think if I take one thing from the whole book, it's that the best thing in your whole life is that. I mean, I might be wrong, but...
No, I think you probably put the nail on the head. It's watching some little, idea, and just the way it's picked up. I mean, it's something you had no hopes for, particularly. You just have ideas, say, yeah, I got this one, and just to see the interaction of other people. But it's also that very important thing of bringing the right guys together and recognizing their talent and what they have, and even them making you realize that you have some too. I think I throw out a piece of crap, and that's great, and I suddenly realize it's not so bad after all.
Very good demonstration. Just what you said. Perfect.
So, any comments or observations from that?
Wow.
It's all there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Good.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of film. Any thoughts on his type?
I'd say AS603. So I've seen the AS603.
Yeah.
I've read the book too, but that's
He's IS something P. Some people say ISTP. But
violent
IS7P.
man, actually. He's a violent man, which has nothing to do with time.
I don't know, she's been Mary's workshop yesterday. SPs in a bad mood, violence. So, yeah, so there you go. But I think that just illustrates it really well, that way that you're in it, you look back, the time frames, the way he synthesises all the different things that are going on.
Changing his perspective based on new input.
Yeah, but throughout his life, he's dabbled in the naughty things. He's a bit like my fish, nobody knows how he's still alive. It is one of the mysteries of rock and roll world. Him and Iggy Pop. Ow. So, yeah.
Dried him out and tossed him back.
Who?
Dried him out and tossed him back in.
That's probably what it is. So what am I telling you next? So just to tell you about the ego development, some people say, well, how do you work with this? And the assessments are very complicated, the existing assessments. They tend to be projective measures, and projective measures are things that you set someone off on something and see what comes out. So they're not yes or no or choice questions. So Lovinger's one that she had that was mainly for her research is called the sentence completion test. So you get the stem of the sentence, like, I think women are, and you see what the person writes. Yeah? And there's a sort of guide you go through showing you what sort of things people at different stages might write. So it takes ages and ages to score them up. Very complicated. There's one that Suzanne Cook-Breuter and Torbert, this is what you were asking me about the other day, developed from that, called the Leadership Development Profile, which is a little bit more for businesses, so it hasn't got some of the weird questions in it, like sentence completion. But it's the same sort of thing, that somebody completes it based on a STEM, and it has to be scored by a human, by hand. It's very complicated. However, I think sometimes when you're having a good chat with someone, you start to pick stuff up. The trouble with asking someone to self-assess, because you could just give them that list and say, where are you on this, is that if they are at the earlier stages, particularly if they're that expert personal identity, they're telling you they're a magician. There's nothing I don't know. Yeah, of course, you're an expert level. So they'll overestimate their level of development. However, if there really was a magician, you don't get many, there's none in this room, I swear, or someone at the more senior levels, they actually have that tendency of, I don't know how far this can go, I don't know how much there is that I don't know, so they might underestimate their level. So it's a tricky thing to get someone to self-assess. But you might pick it up by the topic of coaching that they come to you with. What's their issue? What's really important for them at this stage in their life? Yeah. So that can give it away. How they perceive things, particularly themselves and other people, that can give you a clue. Sometimes I check out what's their response to feedback. This is one of my favourite ones. How do they take criticism? The earliest stages will take criticism with extreme defence. Yeah? So you say, oh, did you realise you did this? Well, I did it because. Well, no, I didn't. Well, you're wrong, you weren't looking at everything I did. Yeah? Whereas they're like, really? Is that your observation? I didn't realise I did that. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah? So how do they respond to feedback? So I usually throw in a few digs just to see how they How self-aware are they? What do they know about themselves? And you can pick this up when you're working with type. So that can be a really good clue. This is something sometimes we do at interviews when we're doing for leadership development programs. How do you define leadership? So what do you think people at the earlier stages might say?
It's self-centered.
Yeah, yeah.
Focused on the power, focused on the status.
That's it. Power, status. Yeah.
My way or the highway.
Yeah. Someone said to me, well, it's the ability to make people do what you want them to do. So it's all that power, expertise. A leader, somewhere in the middle, it could be a leader is the person that knows everything about the job. And you know that leaders, sometimes they don't know anything about the job, and that's fine. But they'll think it's about knowledge. Whereas you get to the top, and it's like, actually, the leader's role is a facilitator. You're not the expert, you're not the big I am. You facilitate people, and part of your job is to develop them, to get them to take the reins, to admit when you don't know stuff, to be humble. Yeah, so you can get some clues there. That's my reminder. So now, how do I do? Let me just consult my little packet of things. I was going to give you an exercise to do, just to see how we're doing with this. How many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Okay. We might have to give this a miss, because I wasn't expecting so many people. But just to let you know what you would have done, what you would have won, I had little cards with how different types might respond to coaching, not the types, how different levels might respond to coaching and things like that. And I was going to get you to sort of sort them into the order just to check what you're picking up and things like that. But I haven't got enough, so we won't do that. But I'll show you the, I'll show you on the slide what the answers would have been. So people on the power and control operate on autopilot. They're very defensive, wary of others, be opinionated, for relationships. If you're working with them on type, really don't expect much. Just the message, did you know not everybody thinks like you? That's enough. They can dine out on that for months. But there's not going to be much appreciation, and they might not even be able to identify what they think. It's unlikely you'll meet many of those people. Social identification, how should I be? How do I fit in? Very concerned about looking foolish as well. You know, what will people think of me? So if you're coaching them or working with type, they may report differently to what they actually are. They might do lots of shoulds, musts, oughts. I don't know, well, what should I be? Well, you know, and it might be difficult to get them to tap into their real selves. Personal identity level, they'll usually know what they like. In fact, they're usually quite quick to get to their type. Oh yeah, that's me. That's a bit of a giveaway sometimes when they're absolutely on the button, that's me. Oh, that other stuff, good lord, how does anyone ever function like that? But sometimes if they're in an expert role, that's absolutely fine. This one, they start to get awareness of weakness and blind spots. You can have a really good type discussion with people who are going into this level. Really looking at building the appreciation of what they're not, encouraging the flexibility to break out of the box. People up here are in the box, down here breaking out. And then as it goes through to more senior or advanced levels, they tend to talk a lot more about the flexibility that they have, rather than the type. They might be aware, they might talk a lot about their bad sides as well, the downsides of being there. So much more ability to maybe go into the shadow sides with them, and for them to be accepting of that. Okay, so that's what you would have done if I'd anticipated such a big turnout. This is another way of looking at it. Who here runs development programs? You know, like we heard a whole group of people in and do things to them. This is quite a nice model because it's sort of showing that we call this horizontal development and vertical development. So horizontal development is finding about more information. So it'll be things like possibly first doing type, it'll be stuff like looking at the model of situational leadership, yeah, so input. Vertical development is actually the breaking out of the box stuff. But it sort of shows that if you're working with groups, those sorts of skill-based interventions, typical development centres, the learning just bottoms out around here. Yeah, and then have you had this experience where people are saying, yeah, I went on this leadership development centre, didn't really tell me anything I didn't know, nothing changed. Yeah, been there, done that. And that's because the development isn't matched to where they're at. So one thing I always do now is think about the group I'm with, where are they at, or the individual, what do they need, what's actually going to cause the shift. And don't go too high, don't go too low. But for the people at the more advanced stages, you've got this ego, what have I called it? Ego development coaching. So technical. But it's much more individualised, in-depth. Quite often they learn better by having experiences. So setting them up on action learning groups to do something, but then giving them that chance in coaching to reflect on how it's going, how they're working with others, what are the challenges, what's the impact, what's the learning. So much more tailored to what they need, and all about pushing the comfort zone. Any thoughts, comments?
Well, are you just, how are you knowing? It's a wonderful thing that you said, diagnostically looking at the group and then tailoring your training to the level they're at. So you're just relying on your own intuition about who they are?
Yeah.
Don't ask her how she
Make it all up as I go along. I'll give you an example though. I worked on this project. It was an 18-month development programme. We kicked off with Myers-Briggs early on, and we referred to it as we went through. There was one-to-one coaching as well as the group input, and there were action learning projects. So it had the whole, you know, it was the... I can't think of the word. It was good. So, it was all there. We ran it with 4 different cohorts, and it was for high potential. So the ones that picked first were the cream of the crop. It went really well. The second lot, really well. The third lot, it just wasn't happening. It just was not kicking in. The learning wasn't there, the changing wasn't there. They were defensive about feedback. They didn't know what to do in coaching. The action learning project was, oh, we've got to do this by then. Okay. It was much more of a task. And when we actually reflected on it as a group at all the coaches, and we talked about what the people were like and what was going on, we could just tell that this cohort were here. They just weren't ready for it, whereas the other cohort was here. So it was a bit like after the horse had bolted stuff, but it was from that experience that we actually learned that we need to do something to make sure we're pitching it right. And this is where we brought in the interviews, where we had the questions like, how do you define leadership? And we would do emotional intelligence profiling on them, and, you know, like I say, throw in a few digs and feedback and see what happens.
So what would you do different in your training to have it at a different level, at the lower level, at the level of personal identity?
Well, these sorts of trainings. These would be the sorts of things where maybe you put the group through type and don't really visit it very often, or you are literally teaching models. Like when I used to work with these PhD students, so they're all in their early 20s, all scientists, so they were pretty much here. And the models we were teaching were the storming, norming, forming thing. What else? Just basic stuff. We'd send them all out in the field with a bucket and a piece of string and a bit of wood and say, make this thing happen, and then reflect on it. So not the sort of thing you would do with people who have already worked out how a team works and stuff. So much more basic interventions. But to them it was enlightening. They'd never done this stuff before.
Right.
Okay, so applications of this. Using a type appropriately to suit a client's developmental level. We sort of said that. Matching your coaching style. Now, this is another thing I'm underprepared for. My lovely little boy Fraser sat here laminating stuff. I'm going to tell him we used it, so don't rouse me up. But what I did here was I had a sort of, this is from my book, here we go, some product placement. I haven't learned a bloody thing, have I? So, I was at Susan's How to Sell things the other day, and just had my head in my hands for the whole thing. But there's a table in the back that actually goes through each level, what the client's capacity for coaching is, what their issues might be they bring, and how you might approach them as a coach. So what I was going to do is get you into groups and take one of these and think about what you might do. But there's not enough, and we're sort of not too good on time. But that's what you would have done, and that's what I'm going to tell my son that we did. He's very proud.
Half a day would have been good.
Yeah? And more stuff. Okay. It also provides a developmental map. If you look at the other handout with the little drawings on, what I've done, which I haven't mentioned yet, have I, is I've written type descriptions that go through the levels. So what somebody might potentially, hypothetically be like at each of the levels of development. And I've put down the example there of the ENTP, because again, they're quite easy targets for this sort of stuff. But you can see almost like from that, where's the person at with their type, and where are they going to go next? Okay. So you can use the theory alongside type, or you can just use it on its own. It's all good stuff. And more information about being under pressure than the grip theories. And do you all know the grip theory? Yeah. It gives you more subtle nuances of that first stage where you become a more exaggerated version of yourself, more polarised. You can sort of track it through this a little bit clearer. Big thing though is, oh yes, this is another thing. You can set appropriate goals, so you can actually tailor the things. So instead of saying, right, everybody on this program is going to do X as their next goal, you can think about the person, think about their type, what's going to push your comfort zone, what's going to break your butterfly out of the box. That was an earlier thing, Sharon, just in case you wanted to wonder that. But you have to know your own limits. So this is based on another bit of the doctorate that I did, was looking at different styles of coaching. And the more advanced and developmental you want to be, the more psychological knowledge you need. So you need, if you've only got MBTI theory, it's all going to fall apart at some point. You need to know other stuff. You need to know other models, other theories, other things about people to make it work. So know what your own limits are. And also this, my three-dimensional thing, this therapeutic aspect, it gets more involved. So you start talking about stuff that's not just about work. You start talking about their upbringing, their relationships. I talk about everything, mainly because I'm nosy. But it gets much more complicated. Optional exercise, that was the laminate thing, I'm not doing that. So, another cartoon from my office wall, just to sort of start finishing up. The deep thought about life. We must all dance to the music of our own drum. But what if our own drum is broken? Or we're hearing someone else's drum by mistake? So, the main thing is to maintain authenticity. Yeah. There's some people that think when you get to the later stages, you don't have a type anymore. It just disappears somewhere into the ether. Yeah. But if you're not true to your type, it's always there. It might fluctuate, you know, the volume goes down on the preferences, it goes up a little bit on the non-preferences, they do this little dance. But your type's always there, and if you're thinking that being developed means you get rid of your type or you transcend it, then you're losing authenticity. So you need to know what's your drum, fix it, and play it. So, we're a bit ahead of time, so we can chat and stuff if you want to in a minute. But this, what is the next stage in your own development? It's a rhetorical question, I don't want to know. But it's just one to leave you with, to think about, okay, where might I be? What do I need to do next? What's going to push my comfort zone a little bit? You can tell where I'm really undeveloped, aren't I? And more product placement. You can find these books on Susan Nash's table outside. There's this one, which is the main one. It needs a rewrite now, but it goes through the type model. Because I'm introverted intuitive, it throws another psychosynthesis model in the middle of all that, because I couldn't help myself. But towards the back, it's got those descriptions of each type at each level. And there's also, this has just come out, this was one of my colleagues, the lovely Gareth English, called us all up and said, let's all make a book so that we look cool when we're training, because people like people who have books. So we've all written a chapter each, me and my colleagues. So my chapter's about ego development, the short version. But there's also chapters in here about type and exercise, type and parenting, some organisational stuff. It's just quite a nice book, and it's written in a very casual style. So there's two places where you might find out more about that. And that's actually it. I knew I couldn't fill an hour and a half. So let's take some comments and thoughts on this. Did you like it? Do you think it's quite rubbish? Could you use it? Is it too complicated? That was great. It was good. Any thoughts?
I just thought your lovely laminated cards that we didn't get to see about matching coaching style to clients' developmental stage.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice to know
Do you want to
about.
have a look?
Yeah.
I have got 6. They're only one stage each, so have a look.
Are they in your book?
It's from the table that this came from is in the book. The table covers all the levels.
It is in the book.
Yeah.
Which book?
The purple book with the picture of the eclipse on.
I'll take the last. I'll take it.
These are nice and specific.
So you can have a little look there at there's nothing Is that it?
You know what I was thinking of in people development? It overlaps a little bit with levels of consciousness. Are you familiar with that? That's what I was thinking about too. Levels of consciousness. It's so good.
Yeah, same thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Consciousness.
Keegan has what's called the subject-object interview as his assessment.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's really similar, really similar.
He has an assessment.
Spiral dynamics is similar.
That's what I was thinking it was spiral dynamics or integral dynamics, whatever they call it. Doesn't it seem very similar to that?
There's a lot of
Because you know,
development.